Hello everybody, my name is Allan Langdale and I'm a lecturer on the circumnavigation of the Black Sea trip that Zagram does. It's a fantastic trip, and one of the things I want to share with you today is something that we see on our first day in Istanbul at the beginning of the trip. And this is the famous church of Hagia Sophia, the Church of Holy Wisdom. I suppose it's probably one of the most famous buildings in the world, and justifiably so. It's 1,500 years old and still standing. Part of the reason for this is that in 1453, when the Ottoman Turks conquered Constantinople, they turned it into a mosque, put up these 4 minarets that you see here, and of course then it was taken care of during the intervening centuries. This is a picture that I took of the east end of Hagia Sophia, which is a picture you don't often see very often from this particular angle, but it looks particularly beautiful in the morning sun. This picture I took near the entrance to the Topkapi Palace, which is also an itinerary on that same day. So there's many of the wonders of Istanbul we're going to see at the beginning of our trip. When you walk through the colossal bronze doors of Hagia Sophia, you really do enter a kind of other world. And I suppose this is the thing that religious architecture should do. It should really impress you. This is a picture I took up into the vaults of the Narthex, the kind of entry foyer of Hagia Sophia. And if you look in the lower right-hand side, you'll see a little mosaic in that lunette shape. I'm showing you a detail of it right here. It's an emperor who is getting down on his knees and praying to Christ. You know, so for some of you, when you go there, you might think, hey, we don't need to bring our telephoto lenses, we don't need to bring our binoculars. But actually, they're very good to bring here because some of these mosaics are very high up on the wall, and you can get a much better view of the details of these mosaics if you do have something like a telephoto lens or binoculars. There's a detail of the face of Christ in that same image. This is one of my favorite mosaics in Hagia Sophia, and it's what's called a dedication mosaic. What it shows is, of course, you can recognize the Virgin Mary with the infant Jesus on her lap. On the right-hand side, that's an image of the Emperor Constantine, who, of course, was not exactly the founder of the city, but the person who made the city of Byzantium into the capital of an Eastern Roman Empire. And it was after that point that the city was renamed after Constantine, Constantinople. So here he is giving a little model of the walled city to the Virgin Mary and Child. On the left-hand side, you have the emperor who commissioned the building of Hagia Sophia, and his name was Justinian. So this church was built in around the middle of the 6th century. So he holds a little model to the church, which he's also offering to Jesus and Mary. When you're inside Hagia Sophia, it's really a remarkable experience. This picture can only give you a kind of partial view of what it's like to be in this space. It really has to be one of the most remarkable interior spaces ever created in the history of architecture. One of the other great interior spaces in the world, by the way, is only about 500 yards away from this, and this is the beautiful Blue Mosque, which has similar kind of architectural forms, but still gives a very different impression when you're inside of it. Even though the general feeling of being inside this impressive architectural space is dramatic enough, there's also tantalizing details of its past. For example, these decorations that I'm showing you here date from the original decoration of the 6th century. For example, you see this sort of white designs inset into black. And in the insides of the 2 arches that I'm showing you here, these are also mosaics that date from the time when it was a church. The decoration that you see in the lower left, which looks new, is pretty new. This is the type of decoration that the Ottoman Turks made when they converted Hagia Sophia into a mosque in 1453. The details include things like this, these beautifully detailed sculpted capitals on the tops of all the columns, and not just the leaf decoration. But do you see that circular device that looks like it has letters in it? That's the monogram of the emperor who commissioned the carving of this capital. I took this picture because it shows the elegant geometry of the building, which, reduced to its most simple form, is a square with a circular dome on top, supported by semicircular architectural elements lower down. And in this one picture, you can see kind of three of these elements all at once: the dome and then two semicircular half domes below. And I love the kind of rhythm of curves that is expressed in this architectural form. Here's an image that shows not only remnants of the Christian period. You can barely make out in the very middle, you can see the Virgin Mary with the infant Christ on her lap. And then flanked on either side, somewhat strangely, are these two big shield-like devices that have Islamic calligraphy on them. Now, this is one of the wonderful things about Hagia Sophia, is you have this kind of hybrid building, a building that was for 1,000 years probably the most important church in Christendom, and then for another 5 centuries it was a mosque. And so you have this collision of two different religions and two different cultures intermingling in the decoration and the architecture of the structure. Here's a detail of the dome. You know, the dome was, when it was originally constructed in the middle of the 6th century, did not last long. It was in a few decades, in fact. It crashed to the floor. So the original dome had some structural problems. But the one that was built after it, although not perfect, did last a much longer time. Although through the centuries, different sections of it have fallen down, and basically the conservation of this dome is a full-time job. They're always working on some way to make it a little bit more stable. It really is one of the remarkable sights. Any of you who have seen the Pantheon in Rome, which is, I think, a kind of a comparable interior space in terms of how impressive it is, you'll also find this pretty impressive too. Whatever mosaic, whatever Christian mosaic was in the circular element at the crown of the dome is long gone. It was replaced with all of this Islamic calligraphy, this Arabic calligraphy, during the time that it was converted to a mosque in 1453. In the upper galleries of Hagia Sophia, you find more mosaics, and many of them depict mosaics of emperors who made dedications of some kind, or they gave money or property to the church. This is an emperor by the name of Monomachos. This may be Monomachos' face, but he actually inhabits the body of a previous emperor. You'll notice that around his face there is a kind of jagged edge. Do you see that? Well, that's because the earlier image here had an earlier emperor. His name was Romanos. But Romanos died, and Monomachos married his wife, Zoe, his empress, and took his place and put his own face in the place of Romanos. Speaking of Zoe, there she is right there. The most impressive mosaics in Hagia Sophia, however, are a grouping that includes the Virgin Mary, who we see here, John the Baptist, and Christ. These mosaics are so intricately detailed. If you take a look at this, this is a type of mosaic that's sometimes called micro mosaics, because the little pieces of glass and stone that the mosaic is made out of are so small that the mosaic artists could create illusions of three-dimensionality that were normally absent in the medium. Take, for example, here's the face of John the Baptist. He had great hair. You can see almost every strand in his head and in his beard. If we take a look at the mosaic of Christ, say, for example, take a look at his nose. Notice that there's a line of white stone at the very crest or the ridge of his nose. But then on either side of that, you have a very subtle gradation of color along either side. And what this does is this really gives dimensionality to the nose. It really looks like a three-dimensional nose, not just a two-dimensional nose. So these are some of the wonders of art that one can see in Hagia Sophia. Here's a detail of that, by the way, the same image of Christ. Here, his blessing gesture with his hand. And you can just see in the lower right-hand corner, the corner of a Bible he carries in his left hand. Well, I look forward to seeing the wonders of Hagia Sophia and Istanbul with all of you on the circumnavigation of the Black Sea with Zagram Expeditions.